once we rest in aware presence and feel the all-pervading space of consciousness that everything is ultimately, and the oneness of all things. Drinking of that knowing and resting as open aware presence, as peaceful presence, is as precious as that 1% of water which we utilize on the planet Earth. And it's a gateway to profound freedom and ultimately deep, humbling surrender. When we know that something is available that is who we are, not the subject, but the essence. It is so precious. It is like the gold that we all seek. Yet if we lose ourselves in the story of me, of the story of I, as a separate entity with the past and a memory of past and an imagined future, if we are completely lost in that, there won't be the freedom of deep, profound peace. Yet we can walk the razor's edge with a unique expression of personality and everything that goes with that, but still know that we are open, aware presence. If we are surrendered to the unfolding flow of the universe, willing to have life as it unfolds, as it is presented before us in each step. Sometimes comfortable, sometimes uncomfortable. And never denying either the pain or the pleasure. Willing to have it all as it is. Knowing that it is often judged as good or bad only through a history, his story, the story of me. So after a while, pain and pleasure stop being such big peaks. Often fears or triggers or responses are subconscious memories raising up instantly when a trigger is ignited. But once they are seen through, those triggers have less and less impact until they collapse. Which of course, then allows us to experience the unfolding of life in a much smoother ride. With far greater peace, because there is no ownership, there is no separate self, egoic self to claim and to judge experience. Whether comfortable or uncomfortable.
There's a lot of illness around us. And not becoming just totally obsessed all the time with that, with the body, with our body or with other people's bodies, or how they are relating to that. I mean, it's a fact, but somehow being able to separate off through the awareness of it, which you were talking about, that all our bodies are inevitably in decline to a greater or a lesser extent.
Yeah.
And how maybe, through the awareness of that one can actually not become overly obsessed with
Yes.
the body.
I understand what you're saying now. And I heard an interesting story. I had a conversation with someone today, and she was telling me, we were talking about how plants, how we, sharing cuttings, and how sometimes watching a plant grow will remind you of the person who actually gave you that cutting. And she explained, yes, I have a plant over there, and a dear friend of mine gave it to me, and she recently died. She was the most happy and joyous person, she was sharing with me. And then she got sick, and within 2 weeks she was gone. But she had lived her life totally up until that point. Didn't go and have all the tests to find out she had this, that, or the other. Only found out 2 weeks before she died, and had a very brief illness and then died. And this brought up some questioning. I said, well, isn't that interesting? Because I wonder, with all the tests and things we sometimes know about our body, and we're given diagnoses, and sometimes we're given, times of that we may be alive for. We're given the bone is pointed, so to speak. And the mind and the mind train would find that very hard not to obsess about that, having lots of appointments, and it's all about this particular dis-ease. And I wonder, in the past, how many people simply declined gracefully, without all the intervention, kept going with their life, and they had little niggles and pains, but they were still, continuing on with their life, and then had a short illness and died. It's quite interesting, isn't it, how medicine has changed things. And of course, there's miraculous things. For instance, when I broke my ankle, I needed to have that attended to, or it wouldn't have set properly. And sometimes, there can be a stent in an artery which will, allow the heart to have circulation for a longer period. However, I do think we as humanity have an obsession about our bodies as these are the only vehicles we have to experience life as we know it, or for the aware presence to experience awareness itself. So, and because we have a belief that this finite body, once it is dead or deceased, that's the end. You know, very, very many people believe once you're dead, that's it, finished. Whereas energy is always transforming, isn't it? You know, the leaves fall from the forest trees and they become the mulch under the forest. Eventually they break down and become soil, and then that soil offers the nutrition for a new seed to grow. And so there is always life. Even in death there is life, because that dead leaf is offering life to a new seed. So because of our obsession around me, the body, I, the body, I, this particular window into reality, we suffer at the thought of this not being. However, if we could overcome the fear of death and accept that in death there is life, and celebrate death in a joyous way, just as we celebrate birth, imagine the liberation that could come from that. It is something to be contemplated, and I feel as we get older, which we are, everyone here is getting older, everyone is getting older. It's, you know, death and the end of this particular body is closer, perhaps, that it is good to contemplate death and to contemplate that it's not such a bad thing. We go to sleep at night and there's no mind. Mind and awareness of mind stops when we sleep, doesn't it? We go to bed and there's no memory. Sometimes we remember a dream, but apart from that, we die and we're born again when we wake up. Or we might be born again a couple of times in the night if we wake up a few times in the night and then die again. But we lose all that aware presence. And there's nothing bad about it. In fact, we look forward to going to sleep at night, don't we? It's a relief sometimes. It's like, oh, yes. Yet we have this deep fear of death, which can make us quite obsessed about our body and our health.
I mean, it's very interesting what you said, because that, in a way, that's been our conversation. And what you said about medicine is absolutely right. That somehow, I mean, we have a friend who's right in the process of everything at the moment, waiting, and how life is robbed because of precisely what you said, that sometimes medicine doesn't allow you to have this separation in a way, to be able to actually live while whatever's happening is happening.
Well, it's not medicine that disallows that. It's the mind that obsesses about the medicine. And it's the choice, I suppose, that we make to go down that route, isn't it? Mm.
And for your metaphor which before of the leaves falling, and we don't look at the leaves on the ground and say, poor leaves. You know, that they are, yeah,
In
we
fact, we
accept that.
often think they're beautiful, the autumn leaves. They're lovely, and you feel a lovely crackle when you walk on them, and they're gorgeous colours, and we celebrate their death.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it it is all very timely in terms of, the stage of life that we're at. And what Sebo says is very true about the amount of people around us who are ill at the moment. Uh, and for some time now, there's a Buddhist monk called Pema. I don't know if you've come across her.
Yes, yes.
And and so I got something of hers a weekend that she had done through Sounds True, um, about the Tibetan book of living and dying. But the teaching is about living, and at um, the Bardo states and the continuous um, movement from one state, one gap to another. Uh, uh, and the training, if you like, for death is to inhabit all these different Mardo states as they occur. Like now, when this satsang is finished, then there'll be another transition into something else and another transition. And so the idea is that throughout life there are these tiny ones and bigger ones before we come to the really big one. And if we really live in the present moment, um, which is linking to what Sebo was saying about, how like, and what all of you say all the time, life is only now. It's not the past, it's not the future. And so that's been going on for me for quite some time. This teaching and being in it and listening again and again, because I find it really, really supportive of this stage in life and of aging. And um, she's very funny about talking about living and dying and aging. And at the end of this weekend, she said, I don't know whether you'll all be comfortable with dying or not, but we are all aging. And she said, we don't mind aging, do we? She said, no, of course I don't. She said, just occasionally I do look in the mirror, and I look and I say, who is that? Uh, you know, and I'm definitely there. This body, this face, this is interesting to be going through this stage. It's a very different stage to being young and full of, our bodies being so different and full of life in a different way. And now this curve it's going down, and I believe it's really, for me, it's really important now to be preparing in a positive way, but preparing by living now. And that brings me much deeper into just being able to move with what's unfolding and agree to what is. you know Something happened the other day that, a few years ago I would have probably just, gone supernova about. The horses did something dreadful. And I went in and they ruined something that I had nurtured for quite some time. And I just looked and I said, is that so? Is that so? Because that's all. Like, what is the point? It's done. Why? But the moment of, also for me, Soraya, that moment of, but not holding on to that moment of, oh my God, look at this.
Yeah.
this destruction, if you like, and so not to bypass that, but to stay with that, but only for a short time, and then is that so, and not become attached to that either. So I'm probably going off a wee bit on a tangent, but
No, no, everything you're saying is very relevant, and that's that beautiful Indian story. I say, is that so? The saint in that village was accused of so many things, and every
yeah,
time he would just say,
yeah,
"Is that so?
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
is that so?" And then they'd change their mind. Oh, is that so?
Oh, I love it.
And
Yeah, I just love
life's like that, isn't it? So it'll be going this way, and then it'll be going that way, and it's
it.
okay. And it actually can be quite entertaining after a while. And I, I hear what you're saying. So many times things happen now, and once upon a time in our passion of youth, we would have reacted in a different way.
Yeah.
In the yogic tradition, the age that we're in now, which is 60 and over, of course, people didn't live so long in ancient times either. It's the time of sannyas. This is the time of sannyas, which is the time where we dedicate our lives to our spiritual path. And when I say the spiritual path, that's misleading. There is no path, but dedicate our lives to truth and to really see all that has eluded us, all the things that we may have once upon a time put so much importance on. We now see the impermanence of all things, and in accepting that impermanence of all things, including this thing, it
Yeah.
it changes everything. So then, even more than ever before, it's we just have now, and now is life. And so when this friend of mine told me the story of this other friend of hers who had loved life, been a passionate, active person in the permaculture world, building and gardens and saving arid lands, and right up until 2 weeks, she was sick for 2 weeks and she was gone. And I have another friend who was a beautiful, dear Japanese friend of mine from years ago, and she was a dynamo, and she was always so present. And she was dancing and doing permaculture around Japan at the time. And she was on the stage dancing, leading the dance, and she just, in the middle of the dance, she just collapsed and died. Of course, it was a terrible shock, and we were all very sad about it at the time. But at the same time, I thought, wow, what a way to go. It was right till the last moment, she was with the dance of life. So, yeah, precious.
Maybe just a short, you mentioned about this obsessiveness with being healthy and not to die. During that so-called pandemic, I even feel uncomfortable to live between such people with such a fear, you know. And yeah, it looks it's lowered this pressure. In March we won't have most of the restrictions anymore, but this taste of that, I don't know how it will. Yeah, it for me it tells I want to even more to go to countryside and as far as it possible.
Which is sad. Imagine being afraid of other humans, and yeah, it's sad, but it's I think it's an epidemic now, Maurice, that so many people, this fear. I've got a T-shirt that says "Freedom over Fear." You know, that fear is actually the biggest virus here, and they're feeding the fear of humanity through the greatest fear, which most people hold, which is the fear of death, and holding that fear of death up in front of everybody's face, and using that as a manipulation to ensure that people do what those manipulators want them to do. It's it's a crime against humanity, I feel. But it's also, once you see through it, it's insane. But it is affecting people hugely. So look at the insanity of humanity, Maurice. And know that there's nothing to fear, because every time you look at someone else, they're looking at you, and you are them and they are you. So what are we even afraid to look in the mirror?
Oh, I was listening to a radio show in the car today on my way back from the ocean beach, just to make you jealous. And I hadn't actually heard of this term, but it's quite bandied about these days. It's toxic positivity. Have you heard of that one, anybody? Yeah, well, it's in the, yeah. Well, you know, we complain about the negativity of the news and the focus on all that, but there's also a kind of toxicity in, you know, the stiff upper lip, the you know, things are, it's just the way it's meant to be, and you know, things are perfect the way they are. You know, it's sometimes okay for it to be not, because if we have this constant idea that things, you know, that our attitude should be positive, we should focus on the good things, and it's actually another very subtle way of avoiding our feelings, because it doesn't allow us to really go into the intensity of living. And on this radio show, a lady had just lost her baby at full term, and it took me back to my daughter Allegra, who lost her baby at 9 months full term, had to go through stillbirth, knowing the truth about it, and all that. It's a very, very intense experience. And she was living with a yoga teacher who kept trying to cheer her up, kept trying to tell her that everything was the way it's supposed to be, and she should, you know, move on with her life. But she was actually affecting her in such a way that she couldn't get on with her life, because she was needing to go into the depths of her grief. You know, and this is this part of living. And so this, and Krishnamurti always used to say this extraordinary idea of wanting to help somebody, you know, wanting to help somebody avoid their feelings. Is that helping them? You know, the giving people methods of cheering themselves up through objects and activities that are taking them away from the fastest way through that suffering. It's really very subtle. There was a book, I think Saraya and I reread it, because I remember reading it in the 70s, called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. I don't know if you've come across that one. It's by a Tibetan Lama called Chogyam Trungpa. And very, very succinct. It's a lecture, a series of lectures he gave on the subtle ways that we have of bolstering the separate self through spirituality, through doing good, through helping others, through constantly living our lives through those who are apparently suffering. And it's a very subtle area, and I find it very intriguing to go into that, because that's why I was interested in this lady telling her story about her inability, not feeling supported in being allowed to go deeply into the suffering, into the feelings of losing the baby. And if we can take that element into our lives, like, I mean, I sometimes have days where I just think, well, I don't feel great today, but it's okay not to feel great. And I allow not feeling inspired. I allow not feeling, particularly good in the body, not feeling motivated even. And I say this to Saraya, I feel no motivation today. I feel no inspiration today. It's just not there. I can't go and meditate to waken it all up again. It's just not there. But at the very heart, the very deepest part, I know that this too will pass. It will pass. It always has, and I have no doubt that it will again. There is no permanence, and being able to sail this boat through allowing the wind to blow through the doldrums, the doldrums, that sometimes there's just no inspiration. I feel like crap. And it feels good to say that, sometimes. It really does. And it's not okay in the sense of, well, I shouldn't really be feeling this, but I'll soldier on. It's not like that. It's being carried by the experience. It's being supported by the experience, because that elusive will-o'-the-wisp of happiness in the future, or happiness if, or happiness when, or happiness when I did this before and I think I'll do that again, all that sort of stuff is gone now here. It really is, because I see life as not always comfortable. It's not. And that's okay. It's like a headache, the headache can't last forever. It just doesn't. It hasn't yet, anyway.
Thanks, Terry. It's a little bit like is that so? I'm not feeling, the body's not feeling good today. or, there is a headache passing through. If we can accept that totally, and I know the experience here has been a deep freedom came from the deepest experience of grief that I've ever had. So, and allowing that, surrendering to that too. But for some reason, humanity and our modern world has set up this thing to fight against anything that doesn't feel happy. I mean, look at the beauty industry. It's an inability to accept the change that will inevitably happen. We will get wrinkly. We are getting wrinkly. We are losing tone. Things don't stand up the way they used to. and we can actually surrender to that gracefully. But sometimes I totally get what Colette said. I've looked in the mirror and gone, really? But on the inside, there's still the same feeling that I had when I was a child. There is the unchanging element, and that's what we're talking about here in satsang. It's not the outer skin and the organs, which eventually will fail, and there'll be discomfort. Pain passes through, dis-ease in one way or another passes through this physicality. If we identify that I am the body, then that is scary and the fear of death comes to the fore. But if we are the unchanging alive presence, the unchanging sense of being that truly I am without anything after it, then that essence is the fountain of youth, really. Because there's just as much joy and playfulness here in that unchanging essence as there always has been. However, as we identify more with the body, as we identify with the mind, as we compare this body to that body and this mind to that mind and the memory now to what the memory used to be, then I can't imagine ever finding true peace or lasting peace, because the fluctuations, in that changeability, there will always be up and down. There will always be duality. There will always be dis-ease one way or another. But when we turn to the unchangeable, to that which never dies and is never born, and at times that is obscured. We can't. We're stuck back in the physical and the mental identifications. But if we can disentangle ourselves and again become aware of the unborn, undying, ever-present I am awareness, then that is freedom. And that is what we're talking about here. So, namaste.